What's up, everybody? Charlie Marlow here. Just wanted to jump on, do a quick video talking about 9/11 a little bit. I was just texting with a bunch of my friends from college about what happened or where we were, what we were doing on 9/11, because we were all in college, Bradley University in Peoria, Illinois. I was a sophomore. I remember that Tuesday morning, I got woken up by my roommate, who is an Australian guy that was also on the baseball team. And he wakes me up and says, "You got to come down, check this out on TV." I remember those of us that were home at the time, I think some guys maybe already were at class. I'm not exactly sure. But I remember watching it on TV. I can't remember if both towers had been hit at that time. I honestly don't remember if I'm watching as the towers crumbled there. It's one of those things. It was 22 years ago. Even when I'm texting with my buddies today, we all kind of had different memories of what happened on that day. And the reason I bring this up is I think this is kind of interesting. So 9/11 happens in the morning, and I think my classes were canceled. I think one of them, maybe we went to class and the teacher sent us home after a quick talk. But because at the time, so we're all on the baseball team, and this is obviously mid-September, so we're right in the middle of fall practice, fall ball, where you just go there. Obviously, you practice a bunch, you play a bunch of scrimmage games. You know, you kind of have like your own little World Series, red versus white or whatever it was. So I remember going to practice, and again, I can't remember the exact time. If it was a normal practice time around 3, if he asked us to come there earlier, I can't remember. But I remember being at practice. We're getting there. I think people are stretching out, maybe throwing a little bit. But then we have a meeting with our coach, Dewey Calmer, former Marine, and he talks about what's going on that day and said, obviously, it's one of the worst days in our nation's history. And we didn't practice. This gets back to the whole misremembering thing, because some people on my text chain said we did practice, but most of us said, no, we didn't. We just met real quick, and then he sent us home. But the reason I bring all this up is at this practice, or we're just standing on the field. I remember standing out there in left field, and it was the old Peoria Chiefs baseball stadium, which is called, at the time, I believe it was called Minen Field. Don't quote me on that. It's where the soccer stadium is now. Now the Peoria Chiefs have a really nice downtown ballpark. But the reason I bring this up is as we're having our meeting, we look up and you see Air Force One. And this gets back to the misremembering part. My friends and I can't remember if they had fighter jets as an escort, but I remember we looked up. And so you can look this up. As I was going through this again today, I was trying to Google this. The Bloomington Pantograph, which is Central Illinois, right by Peoria, had an article about this, because apparently, so the military and the flight logs and all that, they wouldn't say exactly what happened with where George W. Bush went during 9/11. I think some of that's just kind of for security reasons. They don't want him to know what happens, like if there's another tragedy or whatever. But you can look this all up. So if you remember, George W. Bush was reading the books to kids in Florida, and then so I just read through this timeline a couple minutes ago. I believe they moved him to an Air Force base in Louisiana, but then he had problems with communications, so they moved him again. I think it was to Nebraska. So when we saw him, we saw Air Force One up in the sky. And then again, you can Google this. You'll see a bunch of stuff about, they won't confirm it, but a bunch of reports around Peoria and Bloomington, Illinois, that they saw Air Force One that day. So either the plane was coming from Louisiana to Nebraska, or later they went from Nebraska, I believe, back to Washington, D.C. Anyway, just one of those crazy things, because my text chain with my college buddies, we were all talking about what happened that day, and some of us couldn't remember if we actually practiced or just met. I believe we just met, didn't practice, and then all of us, except for one guy, remembered seeing Air Force One above. And it just gets back to I mean, this was 22 years ago, which is crazy to think. Because also, on our radio show this morning, Hot Take Central, 590 The Fan, so my crew on that show, myself, I'm 41. Cam, I believe, Cam Jansen's about, I think he's 39-ish. Jim Hayes is 60, I believe. And when our producer, Cole Bartimus, is 24, I think he's 24. But anyway, he said he was about 2 years old on 9/11, which just makes you think, because hell, I'm a sophomore in college, so I just turned what? I just turned 19. I turned 19 in May. And it's just crazy to think that, somebody I'm working with now was 2 years old on 9/11. It just goes to show you how long ago that was. And obviously it just kind of changed American life forever. I also remember, so that day there was a bunch of panic about what happened, obviously who did it at first. And then I remember, I think my mom called me and told me to go get gas, because I think a lot of the news stations were showing footage of like people worried that they weren't gonna be able to get gas for whatever reason. So I remember going to the gas station in Peoria and filled up my tank. And I don't think the gas prices were super high. Like, I don't think they got jacked up that day, but I remember a bunch of people being in line to get gas, almost like you're wondering, okay, if this came from somewhere in the Middle East, would there be some type of embargo or issue getting fuel? So I do remember going to get gas that day, and the gas station being super full with a bunch of people who I think also were maybe buying into the panic or the assumed panic of what might happen post 9/11. So anyway, just wanted to jump on and give a few thoughts there. Let me know where were you guys on 9/11? It is one of those moments where you always remember where you were. And you hear this from a lot of older folks who lived through things like whether it was the JFK assassination. I'm trying to think in my lifetime. Again, I was born in 1982. I feel like 9/11 is really the only incident where our generation really remembers where we were. I do remember the Sunday night I was working at Fox 2 when we got Osama bin Laden. And that's kind of random because I remember we broke into programming from a sports show and through to Fox National. At the time, I believe it was Geraldo Rivera who was doing the coverage. But I don't even know if that Sunday night when we got Osama bin Laden, although that was obviously great news, I don't think people think of it the same way as always knowing where they were for something like a JFK assassination or 9/11. What do you guys think? Let me know just in your comments. Where were you on 9/11? How do you look back at it now as we are 22 years later and everything that's changed in the world? It is crazy too when you think about how America really did come together. Although I don't think America was nearly divided politically from the standpoint of how we cover news, and basically everybody just watches right-wing news or left-wing news. I feel like we weren't really arguing and bickering to that level back then like we are now. I don't know. What do you think? Again, it's hard to put myself back in the shoes of a 19-year-old, because even though 19 sounds old or older, you realize when you're 19 that you don't really know anything. And hell, I'm not saying I know a lot now at 41, but I really didn't know anything back when I'm 19 years old, sophomore year in college. Anyway, rambled a little bit, but just wanted to talk a little bit about 9/11. In your comments, let me know what you think. Where were you? What are some of the things you remember about that day? Because I'm sure there are other people who remember different things, different parts of the country you were in. Maybe somebody who's older or younger remembers it in a different way. I'm sure some young people had no idea what was going on. Their parents had to tell them what was happening. Some older folks definitely probably have some more historical context of why that happened. And we do now, but I'm saying when you're 19, you don't really know exactly what's going on in the world. All right, that's it. 9/11, never forget. Just let me know in the comments what you guys think, where you were, and how it affected you, and how you feel about it now, 22 years later. All right, see you later.